Hi, this is Steve Farnsworth with the B2B Marketing Show. We're sponsored by Impress Labs, and today I'm really excited to be talking to Don Bulmer, who is with Tribal Planet and has actually had some pretty exciting background, including doing social media for Shell and SAP before that, and is also a fellow at the I forgot the name of the thing.
Society for New Communications Research.
Yeah. I was trying to remember. That's how you and I first met. Is like I commented on a paper that you wrote.
Yeah.
That I really liked, and you and I kind of connected after that. Just so for people who don't know you and anything I missed, talk about what you're doing now in the company you're at.
Yeah, so I've been with this company Tribal Planet for since February this year, and essentially what Tribal Planet is it's a marketing, technology, and an entertainment company, and we have a very particular focus on cause and issues alignment, where we connect brands, commerce, entertainment, and issues that we kind of really find to be high on the conscious of society, such as gender equality, climate, education, and health. In a way that engage consumers on the issues and reward them for actions and behavior with things that they care about, which is often in the form of entertainment content or branded rewards. So it's very kind of interesting, unique model. And before Tribal, I spent 4 years working with Royal Dutch Shell as a VP of Communication Strategy, and I was essentially recruited there to help modernize the way they do external communication and help to professionalize a 600-person organization as it was going through a pretty significant restructuring at the time. And then before that, 16 years in the tech industry in Silicon Valley, with 10 years being at SAP and 6 years working in various startup companies. So it's been quite an interesting career. I've gone from Fortune 1 to Fortune 1 million to Fortune 1, now back to Fortune 1 million. So it's kind of like spanning the spectrum of scale. It's been pretty great.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you've been in at the real high levels as social was starting to come in. SAP, historically, last time had a lot of pretty cutting edge support for social.
Yeah.
And so you've really seen it at the high level and how it's grown. So kind of coming into your current position,
yeah.
What did you see as being your top priorities in how you built your staff in department?
So it's an interesting question. Tribal right now is going through a transition in its business, and the company's been around since 2001, and very well known at the time for bringing the telecommunications giants like Verizon and AT&T into the content business through music and entertainment, and it developed quite an amazing agency for brand activations and so forth, and technology model working on a very exclusive basis with companies and verticals like in automotive, retail, telco, energy. I actually met Tribal through my time at Shell, but now it's really sort of pivoting from that very kind of custom back office innovation company to a platform that could be utilized for scale. So right now, we're in the midst of really figuring out how do we take all of that amazing research and development over the last 14 years and establish that model for the new model for the business. So the team right now is effectively small as we're kind of going through the transition, and most of my energy now is working with the CEO and some of the other executives to build for the build as a hopeful launch in 2016. So it's really one of those kind of classic companies that have kind of built up a really good business, burning it down to kind of build it in a completely different context, and so it's been pretty exciting. But yeah, it's marketing is I'm effectively the only person with marketing in title at the company.
So my next question is it was really about how your marketing group is organized and how you see it changing moving forward. So maybe we could look at it moving forward. How would you like to see your department organized ultimately?
Yeah, it is interesting looking at it in the context of a small kind of startup company, right? In the sense that right now everybody's doing, marketing. There's about 15 people in the company, and it's growing to about probably 25 by the within the next couple of months. But as it kind of grows, I mean, it's something we're starting to think about and build right now. It's classic in the sense that that much of what we do will be through bringing the entertainment industry in, which gives us scale through through pop culture, and that in and of itself gives us eyeballs into many of the cause related programs that we're working on, and so the need and use for traditional digital marketers is probably not as kind of upfront for what we need. It's really how we start to take what we're doing and bringing that into a construct where brands themselves can understand how to build advantage using cause and issue alignment effectively. So I'd almost say that we're working probably more with proxy through traditional agencies and service providers for brands that they work with as an extension of what they're already doing, and we'll be kind of more or less kind of conduits into that. So it's so the marketing equation is will start to become a little more clear for us in a few months as we start to build and launch the new programs.
So I know that based on what you just said, you're really still kind of getting there are a lot of things to consider. But when you kind of look at that, do you think there are a couple of functional areas that your gut says you'll probably have? And what would those look like?
Yeah. So certainly, we start to look at marketing from a product perspective. We'll have quite a significant need for people with a very strong analytic background. As we start to really take, what's interesting, because most of what we do as a company is driven through mobile, and in mobile you can measure anything, and you've got time, location, taste, preference, a lot of behavior type data, and the way that we'll use mobile as second screen experiences with television programming, with live event interactions, and so forth, will really give us a pretty tremendous access and flood to data that then we have to kind of turn into insights that can be useful for brands as they effectively measure campaign investments, as they measure reputation impact. So I would say that much of what we'll have in marketing will probably be geared more towards product on the development and the management side in the initial phases of the company, and that's probably where I'm spending about 50% of my time right now is helping to support that definition of product. So it's building the proposition through really good value is where we're focusing our efforts right now, rather than the more traditional marketing, the virtues of what we're doing.
It's going to be interesting to see to focus so heavily on mobile as a marketer I mean, everyone needs to be mobile, but you're like putting a big piece of your bet is going to be on that. So it's going to be interesting to see where that takes you in terms of your analytics and metrics. I'd be curious to have a follow-up conversation with you as you dig deep into that. So when you think about like kind of the state of digital marketing as practiced by most companies right now, what would you say the state is? What's your kind of, when you talk to other senior marketers, what's your sense of where it's at as opposed to where maybe it should be?
I think it's evolving. There's a tremendous amount of work and effort in the digital space, in advertising, right, as an example, and how to use the sort of the reach through advertising to build scale of audience and interaction, and that in of itself has done, I think, quite an interesting job in putting pressure on the traditional media industry to create amazing content, right? That is captivating, that gets people, that gets their time and attention. So that's pretty good. I think that the space around analytics probably is still there's much to be desired. In my time at Shell, there were a lot of limitations on data and analytics, particularly, off the shelf. The hardest question I had to answer, at Shell was, so what? Right? So it was the most simple and difficult question in the same time. So, we had 5.3 million people following us on Facebook. We had 1.3 million on LinkedIn. We had all of these really great data. So what? What does that mean? How is that actually helping us to drive sales in retail? How is it helping to improve, our engagement with employees? How is it helping to get us and make us sort of employer branding? So it was really, really difficult.
Were you able to take a slice out of that? Were you able to get some data? And if so, what kinds of tools did you use to help?
It was very difficult. I was kind of a little bit benefited from the fact of being at a company like Shell, where the resources were pretty great. We used data from probably about 15 different technologies, and pulling from different media, whether it's Facebook, directly LinkedIn. Each of them have their own really kind of native data insights. We had web analytics, so we pulled all of this data, and a team that tried to make sense of it. And I really kind of refer to it as Frankenstein analytics.
Yeah,
right? It gave us insights that we could. Or gave us, we had to work really hard to use the data to create insights that established sort of a picture that we could use for having a conversation with business colleagues that otherwise don't really care about numbers as much as they do about how that effectively supports them in strengthening sales and retail or loyalty programs and so forth. So it was that data analytics side was quite a challenge. I mean, my dream at Shell was to be able to effectively turn every interaction with the company, whether it was digital, through the retail stores, through television, through events and sponsorships, into relationships that we could then kind of cultivate into something that could impact us, certainly on sales and premium opportunities, employee engagement, and so forth. So that was the big hairy goal, and I think we were effective in building a roadmap to get to there. But it really anchored itself in mobile. Right, mobile was a key point in that.
Well, I think it's interesting you're talking like 15 different sources just to kind of get a little picture. And when you say that, I mean, that's pretty ugly. Yeah. And as soon as you say that, as exciting as like a lot of the new data opportunities and analytics we were getting is, and how pretty advanced in some sense it is, since it is, that idea that you need 15 different sources makes me think of like how when automobiles first were kind of out on the road, you needed to be your own mechanic.
Yeah.
Because that was it, and that's kind of where we are, I think, with the analytics at this point. If you're not, you're kind of your own mechanic to some degree, because there aren't a lot of stations to go to and get it fixed, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, even then, I mean, using that same analogy, my car has been in the shop 3 times for the same problem, because it's not a traditional, swapping out a part. It's a software. I mean, it really is a computer, and so even then, the quote unquote experts, still have to, work, in iteration to kind of get it right. So it's an evolving space for sure. But that's what makes the whole, notion of mobile even that much more critical and important, because you can get so much more really, important data that really can be actionable in many ways.
I'm always surprised at how many marketers are still, even though the data is overwhelming, I'm surprised at how many marketers are still kind of resistant to the idea that mobile plays a considerable role on their communication. So, how would you characterize how would you think about in terms of mobile devices? How is that going to impact the digital channels being used by marketers?
So that's interesting. I mean, if you take a macro view, what's fascinating to me, what really inspires me about the world today, is that it is so super connected through communication. I mean, to put it into context, right? The internet is 26 years old. The social media itself is 11 years old. The smartphones, like with Apple, was 9 years old. So it's incredible to see just in that short amount of time, how much has actually changed. And we've got an entire generation of people being born right now as screenagers, right, who know nothing other than a mobile device as a means to engage, to connect information, and to learn. And it's fundamentally changing behavior and how people take action for the next 15 to 20 years. It's not you can't really deploy the same marketing strategies as you did in a non-digital way to be successful in this environment. And that's pretty incredible to think about, just how much things have to change to be relevant, right? And be effective in this way. And I think that's also one of the challenges too, I think, with the notion of even a social media. I think as marketing and communication professionals, we kind of get really geeked out on the fact of social media as tools, technology, and advertising or whatever. And I think it's really important to understand that fundamentally, social media is more about culture and mindset. It's not a destination that you manage. It's a dimension of how you communicate and how you engage. And success really does require that you tap into that kind of emotional, aspirational, drivers behind what your company or brand or product stands for, and put that into context that people can relate to it. So if you want to have a relationship, you have to relate. So how do you take what's important to you, put it into context of what people care about, and in a way that you're able to have a bit of a relationship and a dialogue, right? That really is a difference between conversation and communication, is taking that friction out of marketing, by speaking or talking to rather than engaging.
So you're in an interesting position, with all where all that data from mobile is going to take you. How would you define how would you define data-driven marketing? What does that look like in practical terms, I guess I'm asking?
For me personally, it's about better data and insights about people, right? Who engage with my brand, that allow me to improve kind of that fair exchange of value and relationships. I mean, so data-driven marketing to me means better information about people who interact. And people don't want to be marketed to, right? They giving people access to what they want, what they care about, and the time and when they need it is really super important. And mobile is such a it's more than just the device; it's even access. I mean, interestingly enough, the number 3 reason why people, when I worked at Shell, why people would come to a retail station, we'd have 25 million people a day that would go through our retail stores at Shell. And the number 3 reason why people go into it was for connectivity, free access to Wi-Fi. That's an interaction and engagement point, right? So how do you turn the access of information? They may not be customers, they may not be coming in to buy anything, but they're engaging with your brand, they're convening at a location. How do you take that brand interaction and turn that into a relationship that allows you to cultivate and develop for multiple types of purposes? So mobile is more than just the device, the banner ad, and the content. It's also that level of access. And so for me, having that type of thinking about it in those terms are super critical to be able to really understand who's engaging with you and why.
Well, let's drill down a little bit on that. I mean, what is your how do you approach turning data into actionable insights? Do you have kind of a way you look at that, or methodology you like to follow?
Yeah, I mean, certainly when you combine, basic demographic information with, the profile around the psychographic information about taste preferences, what people care about, combined with location, and all those kind of circles, if you will, kind of come together, you really get a sweet spot of insight that help you to really understand who an individual is. So when I say that, at Shell, we looked at 15 different pieces of data, or sorry, technology or data from 15 different sources, it was data that pulled, on one hand, the demographic, on the other hand, the psychographic, the other hand, on the location-based, and preference to different channels for us to be able, okay, so how do we have, in some ways, a very unnatural conversation with a 15-year-old child about energy in Brazil, right? Shell as a company doesn't naturally have that type of dialogue with a 15-year-old, but the way you reach that person is through music entertainment, and through artists like Matt Hunter, who is the Justin Bieber of Latin America. And by giving that 15-year-old girl accessing that 15-year-old through proxy of of what she cares about and is passionate about, we were able to have a dialogue and exchange and so forth. And so by being able to understand what people care about in terms of the reward, how they access, how they consume, tied to location, we're able to really do some interesting things that create experiences that people care about, because it's not all equal.
Well, so I'd love to get your take on, let's talk about kind of analytics of platforms and kind of, software tools. And when you kind of look at what you're currently doing, about to do, or what you have done already and what you've worked with, kind of when you're out there, are there any tools or platforms or software analytics that you find most exciting because of the way they help you be a better marketer?
Yeah, I mean, so I didn't work direct with a lot of the analytic and technology during my time at Shell. We had, we got tremendous data from sources like Sysomos and Buddy Media before they were acquired by Salesforce. Adobe is fantastic in terms of what it was able to provide with through web analytics and social media. Google provides a lot of really interesting data and insights, and the companies like Facebook and Twitter also provide direct information that you're able to to get more if you're paying a lot of money to them. They give you a little bit extra that's not native. But so I think it's so my experience has never really been there hasn't been one single source that was sort of a silver bullet that answered all of my questions.
Mm-hmm.
I got relative value out of every single technology and source that we worked with, but the human side of pulling that all together was probably the most difficult thing for us.
The only thing I've been really disappointed in, and
I'd be curious on your side too, is what you find to be most effective in that space. I mean, it'd be good to learn and understand your point of view as well.
Well, I was going to say, one thing for me that I think the most frustrating thing about analytics are sometimes these really high level things about kind of how much likability, kind of sentiment kind of stuff, which is really sure, it'd be nice to have a little piece of that, but sometimes that's really the main thing that people highlight in their platforms. And sometimes a lot of the analytics, I won't name names, but I've had a few analytics folks reach out to me and I'll look at their data and go, well, what does that really tell me? How do I turn that into insight? And it's like, and so that's been the most frustrating for me. The thing that I've liked the very most, or some of the basic things, like between Google Analytics, and analytic packages that look at actual real behavior, and then also things that allow you to do A/B testing. Because we've all been into some meeting where people want, well, let's look at the 4 ad campaigns you want to do, or the 4 landing pages you want to do. We'll pick the one we like best. And it's like, no, we're not. Let's make an educated guess and test all 4 of those things out, or try different headlines. And let's not have a process where we have to approve a new headline or change the thing. Let's have one person just keep testing the hell out of it. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because what I found to be most effective for us towards the as we start to get a little bit more kind of effective in our work, particularly at Shell, is that we'd start our approach with understanding what is it that we want to prove. So almost creating the dashboard of what are the things we want to prove and understand and learn about, and then how do we effectively back into that with the type of experiences, the channels that we need to organize, the different types of partnerships that need to kind of come together, that give us the data and that interaction that ultimately help us to kind of prove either the hypothesis or kind of the insight or what have you. So in some ways, starting with really kind of that notion of what is it that you are really wanting to solve for, is important. And most off-the-shelf packages, kind of are, largely sort of bespoke, connected to, things that they can control, which may be 5% of the equation, which is hence why we needed so many different technology packages, is, because most of them only, were able to extract or do things with, with 5% of what we needed. So we had to bundle it, and wire it all together.
I think that's really good advice. Dave Richardson, who is the one of the co-founders from Press Labs, he talks often about, start with your end game in mind. What is it you really want to change, and then work backwards. And as simple as that is, it's just most people don't do that. They just kind of like, well, let's pick our things and move forward. Because of the experience you've had at being like at SAP, big, really large companies who are doing some more forward-thinking engagement in terms of social, or adopting it more as an entire department when other large companies didn't. Having seen that, when you look at kind of your approach to social media, how has it evolved when it comes to now, when you're looking at social elements, which I know is even more so now for probably Travel Planet. When you're looking at it, how has your strategy evolved in terms of when you come to planning? What's different now than maybe 3 years ago?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it probably comes back to something that we spoke about earlier, in the sense that, I find it's really important to understand that, at the core, social media really is about that culture mindset, and you have to have that appreciation that it is a very human-driven medium, and success requires that you remove that complexity of structure and organization, and tap into things that that appeal to what human people aspire and inspire to become. And I found that to be, that was one of my really big insights from Shell, as we were trying to figure out, because my job was to basically define and establish the social media strategy for Shell globally, is that we found that we wanted to organize our social media based upon the structure of the corporation. People didn't look at Shell as upstream, downstream, innovation products. I mean, it was, we had to conflate the brand into sort of the entry points that people really wanted to engage. So I think taking that very non-technical view of social media, and seeking first to understand that that it is about people, and understanding, okay, who's the audience that you really want to reach, and what is it that they care about, and how do you make those really cool experience interactions, is really how I approach it. And so it's not so much about the platform first. It's, it almost is in some ways kind of what we just talked about. We think about what is it you're trying to accomplish, and what is it that you want to measure, improve, and then how do you, to create the types of experiences through different channels that allow you to be able to have that impact in a relatively scalable way.
When in your current analytics, I understand you guys are going to do a little shift, so you can either speak to what you're currently doing or looking forward. But look at your analytics, especially given mobile. I mean, what are the analytics that you're or the metrics you're looking at right now that you're most interested in? The thing you look at most often, the thing you want to see if you've moved the dial on, the thing that you want to kind of keep track of. What are those metrics that you open to that page and you want to look at that information?
So it's a big question, at least through the lens of kind of where we are right now. I think in some ways what we find is through mobile, you really get a truthful understanding of what people care about, and in the sense that when you ask somebody a question through survey, it doesn't really say much, but based upon how an individual chooses a type of reward, the type of music that they listen to, the type of things that they follow, even causes, right? Does this person care about climate versus energy access versus, how do they define these things? So understanding that sort of psychographic information about an individual is really central to how we define kind of an analytic dashboard that allows us to be able to effectively, engage kind of in a meaningful way. So I mean, so we're looking at taste preference data, right? We're looking at location is super critical. The approach that we take in that it's not just about one mobile app; it's about an ecosystem of applications that you're trying to understand and learn about people. It's so it really is more focused on that human element than anything else, that allows us to then kind of create the brand interactions that drive commerce. In many ways, commerce is the big play for us.
When you look at yourself as a marketer, one of the challenges, one of the fun things of being a marketer is I think in the Bay Area and high tech, is you get to test a lot of new toys and tools that maybe other people aren't quite using yet. So it's always kind of an exciting process, and I love working with new clients, because to figure out how do we connect with their audience, what kind of content is going to be appropriate, and so. But how do you, like, when you look at, I mean, so that's one way I keep my saw sharp. But how do you, and what do you like to do to evolve your marketing skills and your leadership skills? What do you do to kind of make sure that you're growing and evolving?
Well, first, talking to super smart people like you is always really good, and I think
thanks, Alan. That $20 will be in the mail tomorrow. So
I think even more so, it's like just even preparing for this conversation, right? It forces you to kind of reflect and critically think and try to come up with something interesting, and because I think sometimes you get so caught up in your day-to-day activities that that time to actually really think and reflect is a luxury that sometimes we just don't have. So for me, just preparing for this conversation was fantastic to kind of come up with interesting kind of perspectives and points of view. So that's another thing. I mean, reading, and I use my commute time on back and forth to work to do audible books and podcasts, and that's really great. And
is there a podcast that you've listened to that you would recommend, or a book that you've been listening to that you'd recommend?
Interestingly enough, my favorite podcast is Stanford's entrepreneurial series. They do this during the fall and springtime. They bring in really incredibly smart people to engage their graduate students and people who are entrepreneurs developing products, or people who've actually created successful companies that share their own experiences and what they've done to be able to to achieve growth, and how they've used different technologies in a way to become effective and from an audience standpoint. And so I find I get a lot of some of my what I found to be best ideas have come just from listening to the experience of other people, and as they share their stories. And that podcast in particular just is one that I've stuck with for probably the last 4 or 5 years.
And where could other people find that if they wanted to check it out?
It's on, so it's iTunes. So go to iTunes and look at Stanford Entrepreneurial Series podcast. It's there, and like I said, it's every week to 2 weeks they have something new that comes up, and it's super great. So that's good. And I do a lot of reading. Like Zeit is, I'm an avid reader of Zeit, which kind of curates content from in some ways it learns what you're really interested in, and across various topics, and who you follow, and so how
do you spell that? How are you spelling that?
Zite. It's an app. So I read quite a bit of all the stuff that you publish, and just kind of comes up into the newsfeed because I follow you, and so it's so things like that are also really good to be able to kind of even when you don't get a chance to talk with folks, just to understand people who you care about in terms of their thinking and experience, be able to kind of follow them through the content that they produce. So that's a good one for me as well.
So just before I let you go here, when you kind of look across marketers collectively, kind of across the country, and see what they are doing, not doing, is there something that you would something that maybe they're not incorporating or not fully incorporating yet, that they really, to be kind of current and best practices, they should be? What would your recommendation be or your guidance be?
I mean, I think personally, my view is better kind of integration of cause and issues. I've had a chance to conduct and co-author a number of research studies that have looked at behavior of consumers and the impact that social media has had on purchase decisions. And the last study that I conducted with my kind of research partner, Vanessa DeMauro, we published it last year. It's called The Social Consumer. And one of the most interesting insights is that we found that consumers are really becoming increasingly discerning and more discerning about the brands they choose to support through their purchases and advocacy, largely due to values alignment. And part of it's due to greater choice that consumers have and who to buy from, but even more so, it has to do with higher expectations that people have to support companies that are genuinely doing good and share the same values on social issues that also connect back to personal and individual concerns such as my health, my education, my environment, and so forth. So essentially, consumers will often pay a premium for goods and services where beyond fulfilling a specific product need, the alignment to values and purpose is particularly strong. So they look at purchases as votes of confidence more than anything else. And so I think figuring out ways to kind of, and it's not traditional corporate social responsibility. I mean, we're not talking about philanthropy. We're just talking about its behavior in the context of of your impact on society. I think that is prominent because of a millennial generation that tends to care more about issues.
If people want to connect with you on the interwebs, where can they find you?
So they can SlideShare. So I've got a lot of the research that that I've done with Vanessa over the last 8-9 years is up on SlideShare. LinkedIn, of course, is always a good place. Twitter, email at
what's your Twitter handle?
Don_Bulmer at Yahoo.
And that's BULMER.
Correct. Yep. That's always an easy place to reach me as well.
Good stuff. Don, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it, Steve.